So hello guys. So yeah, this is basically the follow-up, one of the follow-ups actually videos of the series whose name I already forgotten, even though I named it. Yeah, Warframe trading and economy. So this is gonna be part 2, I think. Yeah, part 2. Yeah. So basically, what I've done here is I added this tiny block of code, which I already ran this today, unfortunately, which is a pretty good example of poor planning from my part. So let's just run it so you can see how it behaves like, if that's of any interest to you. So basically, now the fetch and update functions, and hence the initialize functions, since it works off of those two functions. But anyway, now they put the data into a separate data folder. And as you can see, I have gone a little bit overboard here and got about, what is it? I think last time I checked was 164 data files. So, you know, I have quite a lot of information here at the moment. And yeah, so it's basically now since they are in a folder, I was in the position where I could loop over all the files in the folder, which made it so much easier to update them all, which I will show actually by a simple press of a button. Give it a few minutes and we'll just see how it goes through the files. So, you know, sex at Bolto, at Lex, and sort of keeps on going. It doesn't stop until it reaches the end. No update needed because I already updated them. Yeah, silly me. It would have been a good addition to the episode to show it actually updating. But anyway, yeah, so it just keeps going. And since I already updated them, I should probably stop this because it takes quite a while. There are, like I said, almost 200 files in here. It's only up to E at the moment. So yeah, I think it takes 5 minutes for everything to be settled down, depending on, I think it depends on how many days have been added. So if you update it daily, maybe 5 minutes. If you update it every 2 days, maybe 6 minutes or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, just be sure to update it every 90 days if you are following with this, because if you miss dates, I don't really know what would happen. If it leaves gaps or overwrites everything. And I'm not actually willing to test that. 90 days is a lot. It's 3 months? Yeah. So you'll probably find time within 3 months to update it at least once a month. So, you know, there's that. So anyway, back to the topic at hand. Let me comment this one out and bring back this and this, because I actually sort of coded in a tool that's it's not necessary for gathering the data, but it helps with sort of analyzing the data. So what it is, it's basically a crude predictor of the prices, and by crude I mean very, very crude. So what this does, let's actually take a look at the function first. So these are just some initialization of the variables and arrays we're gonna be using, so yeah, not that important. Anyone with a sort of intermediate background in programming would be able to figure this out. This is just a quality of life thing. It sort of prevents you from predicting more than you actually have data, which is, if you think about it, it would be kind of silly to predict more into the future than you can see back into the past, so best not do that if I were you, and actually put in something like this. Yeah, so then it's sort of, there's a loop here. Oh yes, I should probably explain these. So yeah, let's take a detour to paint, which I know, very professional, right? So here we have a sort of stock market sample, if you will, and say this here, I'll make it in purple, is the present day. Is that visible? Oh, it's a bit thick. Yes. That is the present day that you can see here. And we want to predict this, which will happen in the future. So basically what this code does is to predict this much, we have to look this much back. So it basically just... Okay, now what shall I... Let's use yellow. It looks... let me do this. I hope that is visible. Actually, let's use orange. It takes that and it looks that far back in the data. Like so. And then it pretty much does that same thing. What am I doing here? It does that exact same thing, but everything is shifted by a certain number of days back. In my case I chose 3. So yeah, it looks to these points, which let's also make them orange. It looks at that time window, and throughout this it calculates the standard deviation of the data. It sort of averages over, it starts from here. Then it takes that, puts it number 1 over here. Then it takes the next 2 days, averages them, puts them number 2. Then the next 3 days, averages them, puts them in number 3. And for example, it would generate a plot that looks, say, like this or something, of averages. Then it sort of does a same procedure with this one and gets, say, a plot like this. And then those plots are averaged to get, say, a plot like this. And the same thing is done with the standard deviations. So let's say the first standard deviation happens to come up right there, and the second one comes right here, for an example. And there's a tiny little parameter to tweak with this one, but I'll get to that later. So, also, since we are in a current time, so to speak, it doesn't make sense to have the further back data to affect the prediction that much, since the prediction is basically based off of the most recent data, most recent events in fact. So this one actually is weighted twice as much. I think it's twice as much. yes, this is weighted twice as much in the data, whereas this is weighted 1 time as much, which is basically no weight at all. And with it, when you average over 2 of these and 1 of this. So yeah, that way, sort of, the more recent events weigh in a lot more, while you still have some information about the past events, but they're not as dominant in the average. So yeah. Also, this weighting thing, it's not really used in the standard deviation thing, since, you know, there's a principle or a concept that's used in finance, which is the prudence concept, which basically states, always think of yourself as being at a disadvantage in a scenario. So basically, the wider the error bars, the how should I say, the less you know about what's gonna happen to the result. So yeah, it's even though they are, say, this wide, plotting them a bit wider, say, or a bit lower, say this one down here and this one down here, sort of gives you an idea of the worst case scenario. So I hope that makes sense. So now let's get back to the code and show how this was implemented. So basically, this is just what I said. It sort of takes the past days. Past is a variable here, so we can change it. I usually go for 10 or 7, which is a week. Yeah, something. Don't go too crazy with this variable. It's no good can come from going too crazy. So the standard deviation. It calculates standard deviation by averaging the past 10-day standard deviation and the past shifted 10-day standard deviation. So to show this on the paint again, it calculates the standard deviation of this and averages them to basically get a better feel of it, so to speak. Yeah, and that's the standard deviation. That's how far the data can potentially deviate from the mean, hence the name. Now, for the average, it's basically the same thing, but instead of calculating standard deviations, we calculate averages, and we multiply by 6/4 and 2/4. This is the weighting I showed. Basically, yes, I should probably go over this. So back to paint. So we all know from school that the average is x1 plus some other x2 divided by the amount you have here. In this case is 2. Apologies for the crappy handwriting, but it's really hard to write with a mouse. So if we want to weight these, say 2 and 1, we put 2 here. But then we have to, if we are counting this twice, we have to change this into a 3. So what we need to do is multiply everything throughout by 2 again to cancel out this 2, and then redivide by the new one, which in this case is 3. So divide by 3 here again. And if you work these coefficients out, you get 4 on 3 and 2 on 3. So this is just a crude example. So the more general case is, say we want this to have n times larger weight than this. In that case, we multiply throughout by 2 and then divide by the new, which is quite a rhyme. The coefficients would be 2n over n plus 1 and 2 over n plus 1. So yeah, that's the formula if you want to experiment with different weightings, and I think I just cut this off here. Yeah, so yeah, if you want to experiment with different weightings in an average function, these are the coefficients you would deploy. Yes, that's right. And then for this case, I actually am not using 2, I'm using 3 here. Oh shit. Rather than 2, meaning since we are using 3, n is equal to 3, so we get 6 over 3 plus 1, 4, and 2 over 3 plus 1, 4. Hence the 2/4, the 6/4 and 2/4 coefficients over here. So that explains that. So, you know, we're averaging, generating the entire thing. Now, we need to generate the prediction curve. Also, a thing I would like to add is this X array. This is, so basically it would shift to the point where you are predicting from, rather than starting the plots from 0 when we plot it eventually. And this why not array would be the predictive plot. So it would have, it's a 3 by past table, past would be any number, say 10, past by 10 day table, where the center column would be the mean, and the outer columns would be the upper and lower deviations. So that's what we're basically calculating here for this for loop here. And also, it's good to mention that the mean, we take away this from it, the mean of the first entry of the mean array, just so we can center everything around 0. Now, there's a fairly good reason, I will close this, why we are doing that. And that reason is because we want to start, we want to get the relative mean to the starting point, how it shifts with respect to the starting point, just so we can do this. We can just add it to the start, to the initial point. Consecutively, we get, for example, the mean shifted by +1 on the first day, and then it shifted by -2 on the second day. So you get, if it was 10 platinum, it would go up to 11, and then it would go down to 8 platinum in the day after. So we want a relative sort of approach to it. So yeah, that's the mean, and then, no, this is the mean, and then the lower bound for the standard deviation, and here's the tiny parameter I've been mentioning. It's actually 1% larger than standard, than the calculated standard deviation, which again has to do with the prudence concept. It's better to assume the worst in such a scenario, rather than say, oh, it will be alright, and then end up everything blowing up in your face or something. So yeah, this is just a preference parameter. You can go without it, but I prefer having it there. And the upper bound for the standard deviation is similar, but without the parameter, because you don't want to assume you're going to make more profit than you realistically could, because that doesn't make sense. So yeah, in fact you could potentially go away with doing 0.99 here, but you know, for simplicity, let's just avoid that for now. And next we just produce the plots. So let's take a look at what the plots would give. Alright. Crude predictor. Let's run this. Say 11 days behind the present, so we could compare some plots. Hopefully it doesn't explode. Oh yes, there it is. So, you know, sometimes it gives quite decent predictions. This is the mean, which is alright. Especially, don't look too far in the future with this, guys. It's not that reliable. Say, first 3 days there? 2 days, I think. Yeah, it's pretty within the error bars. It also happened to be at a starting point that's roughly the mean here. So it sort of, I will show this, it sort of struggles with tight corners. Like, for example, the 10 day in the past mark. Yeah, it's a bit not as good, sort of, because it was at a lower point in the prediction, so it sort of veered off at an undesired direction, but you know, still caught a few points here and there. And yeah, and to show how it really struggles, let's put 47 days back, because I know that this was a point where it sort of struggled. So yeah, this is, well, alright, it's caught at 1 or 2 days here, but and back here as well, but it sort of missed this entire dip here, which is a huge dip in fact, almost half price dip for Worm Prime, poor Worm Prime. So yeah, kinda, and 36, I'm here at 43, which is 9. No, 6, so 6 more days backwards. It should be on top of that peak or something. Yeah, so it's not on top of the peak. There's mathematics. So yeah, it's sort of, like I said, I named it Crude Predictor for a reason. This, just a little history about this. Back when I was, what, 7 years old, I think, and RuneScape, which is a game I used to play religiously back in the day, got the Grand Exchange, and they put up their prices up there on the website. I used to do this. I didn't know much code back then. I only knew Java, I think, and Pascal scripts. But you know, I used to do this all by hand. You know, looking up on the site, checking the values, taking a rough, because the axes were like 10 gold difference between the scales. So I used to sort of eyeball it. And then I used to do this method by hand. Took 3 days before I got bored, and then sort of try to predict 3 days in the future. Yeah, good times. So yeah, 7-year-old me didn't really know much about how the market works, but you know, it sort of sufficed for me back then. So if you want to try this, and it's pretty easy to understand, I think. That being said, I didn't have to learn it from anyone. So yeah, and in the future I will of course be implementing the more, you know, heavy machinery techniques that they use in finance, like Monte Carlo simulations, Black-Scholes, Brownian motion, and eventually this big ass neural network over here that I haven't figured out yet. So yeah. Until next time then, thanks for watching. Bye bye.